We have an absolutely amazing day planned and an absolutely amazing hour planned right here on the Galaxy stage. Did everybody see this? What? This is incredible. I mean, this is debuting right here, this statue of Rey from MadamTussauds. What do you guys think? She's staring at somebody. I'm so sorry. Wow, that is absolutely incredible artistry right there. This is the world premiere of this figure right here. You're seeing it live at Star Wars Celebration on the Galaxy stage. That is just insane. I just cannot get over how cool that looks. We just saw this about 5 minutes ago, and I'm still just looking at it. MadamTussauds does incredible artistry, lovingly crafted by hand, made by an incredible team of artists that you're about to meet. We're about to go through the entire process of what they do in order to bring Star Wars to life. How many of you have been to the exhibit here in London? Have you seen the experience? Yeah, incredible, absolutely. If you haven't, I definitely recommend you check that experience out. We're going to look at a quick video of their process, and then we're going to get on with the show. Let's check this out. MadamTussauds at work.
The Star Wars experience at MadamTussauds is a whole brand new area. It comprises of 11 sets with 16 brand new characters from episodes 1 to 6, and it is an immersive experience. It will feel almost as if you're in the films. You'll be able to interact closely with the characters. We had a team of sculptors here and colorists and costume experts go over to the Skywalker Ranch, so we were able to take photographs and measurements of the real thing. So having got all of our material, we then start sculpting. I did the head of Princess Leia. I then get approximately 4 or 5 weeks to work on the portrait using all the material that we've then got.
So the clay heads are moulded using a very traditional method called a plaster piece mould. We use plaster to make between 13 and 17 individual pieces that make up the entire head, and then it's ready for the wax. We melt between 10 and 15 litres worth of wax and then individually colour it for every single head. Then it's ready to go up to wax bench, ready for hair insertion.
There's 10,000 hairs in the head, so it's going to take us 4 weeks to insert the full head. It's made out of human hair and we insert it individually. Chewbacca has been our most difficult challenge. We've colour matched him from the original film. We've used real yak hair, so it's got a real different texture to Luke's. There's been a whole suit knitted for him, and there's been a team of 10 of us that's had to take different sections of his body, and that's taken over 800 hours.
One of the most exciting aspects of this project for MadamTussauds is obviously the lightsabers. We've worked very closely with Lucasfilm, replicating them exactly from film reference.
To create the costumes, we went to the Skywalker Ranch to the archive and were able to handle original costumes and props from the film, which has been the most amazing resource. It means we've been able to create the most accurate costumes and props. For every single fabric, we had to match and get them signed off by Lucasfilm, so they're as close, if not exactly the same, as the originals, especially for the prequel trilogy. We've had professional breakdown artists come in to break them down as well, so they look like they've been on Tatooine, they look like they've been in battle.
You will be surrounded by sort of physical effects and light effects and sound effects, like the sound of the lightsabers.
We worked very closely with a Lucas-approved maker for Darth Vader, who has used casts from the original costume to make ours. Every detail will be completely screen accurate to the film, down to the smallest scratch on his helmet.
It takes a week to colour every head that we do. We use artist oil paints, building up layers, lots and lots of layers, to get the skin effect that we're after. Sometimes it's dry brushing on to get a sort of more of a matte effect, or if we want a kind of broken skin effect, we'll use a technique called spattering, and you'll get a kind of airbrush kind of effect. So it's as real and as accurate to how it looks in the film as possible. I personally I've been waiting 8 years to paint a Harrison Ford, and it's really amazing that it's actually Han Solo as well. So it's been a great privilege, to be honest. What's really great with the attraction is that it's an interactive experience. So with Han Solo, you can sit opposite him in the cantina scene.
You can meet Darth Vader doing the I am your father scene. You can see him also dueling with Luke Skywalker with the lightsabers. There's C-3PO, R2-D2. We've got the Duel of Fate scene. You'll be able to see Princess Leia and Jabba the Hutt. And there's even a part where you can go into the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon and experience going into hyperdrive with Chewbacca. So there are lots and lots of different areas, and it's an immersive experience. So you'll really feel like you're part of it.
All right, give them a round of applause. The team from MadamTussauds. Join me in welcoming Brian Merton from Lucasfilm and the incredible artists from MadamTussauds. Come on up, you guys. Go ahead and have a seat. So that video was really, really enlightening in terms of the level of passion, the level of artistry, and the intense amount of detail that goes into all of the work that you do. I came on stage and I saw this and I was just immediately thought to myself, wow, I'm glad I'm not wearing Poe Dameron's jacket because she looks like she could take me down with that staff. So can you just walk us through the process, just all the way from the beginning, how you get to a figure like this Rey that you just unveiled here for the first time today? And oh, I'm sorry. You want to meet our panelists? I want to make sure that everyone knows who you are. Can you just introduce yourselves briefly?
Hi, I'm Brian Merton. I work for Lucasfilm. I do product approvals.
I'm Dan Woodley, Principal Sculptor at MadamTussauds.
I'm Keely Scothen. I'm responsible for costumes, props, droids, weapons, and everything else.
I'm Siobhan O'Dwyer. I'm a hair inserter.
I'm Neil Harrington, and I'm a moulder.
Hi, I'm Trish O'Rourke, and I'm a colorist.
So a lot of different disciplines represented here that all go into making the final product. So take us through the very beginnings, right? We saw in the video, Brian, that Lucasfilm worked with MadamTussauds, and you were actually able to go, Keely, you were able to go to Skywalker Ranch.
I was very lucky and got to go to Skywalker Ranch. We went to the archive. There was a small group of 3 of us, and the ladies there are so lovely and helpful. And we just had access to all the original costumes, all the original props, and we just took as much information as possible from them. So we took like the fabric information and like how they were constructed and Pantones and colors. It was just the most amazing sort of reference. We don't always get access to that, and I think it really shows when you look at the figure quality, like they are as close, if not spot on, because we had access to all of that information, and it was just fantastic.
Did it kind of, what were your expectations going into that versus the actual experience?
Oh gosh, you can't imagine it, because you fly to San Francisco, and that's already amazing because you're in San Francisco, and then you go across the Golden Gate Bridge, and then you pull up, and it's quite nondescript outside, and then it's quite a long drive up, and then you get to these great big blue barns that just look like they're farm sheds, really, and then the gates open, and it's just a Star Wars mecca. It's like you walk in and the first thing you see is the Death Star, and it's like, I don't know how I'm going to concentrate and do any work here because I just want to look at everything. And it's not just Star Wars stuff, they've got Indiana Jones stuff there as well, so it's like every 5 seconds if you're going to have a look at something else. But it was just amazing. They had to kick us out at night. We'd be there first thing in the morning, like eagerly at the door, and then at night we'd be out of there.
I'm sure many people here could relate to that feeling, I'm sure, right? So, but you mentioned having a job to do. You had a lot of work to do. Let's talk, can you talk about the research process that you go through when you're sculpting these figures and how it applied to Star Wars, yeah?
Yeah, all of our figures begin with the research part. Obviously, you're not just depicting the look of the individual that you're portraying, it's the entire persona, the entire character. And particularly when you're working with movie characters, intellectual properties, it's essential that everything's right. I mean, obviously, we make our portraits as lifelike and as realistic as possible, but that's not where the detail stops. Particularly with Star Wars, there's so many little details, like down to the fabrics, as Keely was saying, the equipment that they're holding. So everything needs to be authentic. And I think with Star Wars, you almost got to take it to another level because the expectation of Star Wars fans is perhaps that little bit higher. And they're the people that are going to kind of go, you've got like 3 switches on that panel and not 4, or you've got the wrong colored lightsaber or something.
Right, so you got to do a lot of research, but then from there, how do you even begin to start on a figure? Because one of the things that I learned, I went to visit the experience earlier this week, and in a day and age of digital scanning, for example, you could think, well, this is a scan of something, but this is all done by hand. Every single discipline, you do this by hand. How does that process begin?
So the way we work is very traditional and not that far removed from the way Madame Tussauds herself worked. Obviously, today we incorporate a bit more modern technology. We're working from good high-resolution photographs, in some cases 3D captured images. But in terms of making the figures, we start by sculpting the figure in clay. So that's part of my job. We generally have 2 sculptors working on a figure at a time. So one sculptor will be working on the portrait while another sculptor works on the body. That's mainly for purposes of time, because it means the whole figure is being constructed simultaneously. You could have one sculptor do the entire job, but obviously it's going to take you a much longer period. So generally we have 5 weeks to sculpt a head and 5 weeks to sculpt a body. So that's all happening at the same time. The head, as you can imagine, is a bit more of a kind of a sit-down job. So the portrait sculptor is very much focused on that. The body is a much more physical job. We have to construct a metal armature inside the clay. Clay, obviously, is quite dense and quite heavy, and it won't support its own weight. You can see in the images on the screen some of the metal that's going up inside with the head. Obviously, Chewie's head's a bit larger than your average figure. So that's to support the weight of the clay and make sure that the whole thing doesn't start to slump and distort and lose shape. So once you've got the armature constructed, you basically start laying clay directly on top of the armature, so you're working from the bottom up. Some people like to more or less model anatomically almost like a skeleton and up through the muscles to the surface. It's quite a traditional way of working. And then throughout the process, we're able to take the head off of the modeling stand, and we have part of the armature that comes out of the neck. We use what we call armature wire, which is a flexible aluminium wire. We place the head on top of the aluminium wire, and that allows us quite a lot of movement in the kind of neck region. So we can pose the head. I suppose what I'm saying is the attitude of the head is just as important as the expression. If you want to depict somebody if they're smiling and they're engaging you, then you probably have their head coming forwards, whereas another pose might be with the head cocked to one side. So we need a lot of control in that area. So that happens probably 3 or 4 times throughout the process. And the head will be completed generally before the body. At that stage, the head's joined to the body, and the whole figure goes down to the molding department for the head to be molded before the body's molded. Maybe I'll hand over to you to explain some of that.
Yeah, we do what we call around the clay, where as a team, whoever works on a figure will go and look at the actual clay before it even comes down, and they will decide how it's going to be molded, any special requirements. The costume the figures are broken down to a certain way that the costume almost dictates how that will happen. So no seams or anything like that are on show through the actual figure of when it's in situ. But we get the figure downstairs, and we then mould the heads first, normally 11-piece plaster mould, which is then, we make 11-piece plaster mould, which then do a wax cast out of. We do several wax casts. One, whichever is the best head, would then be the one that is the final head for the piece. And then once we've got another wax cast, we'll put that on top of the clay figure. Once that's checked out, we then do a fiberglass mould of the body, really, in normally 7 to 8 pieces Takes about 4 or 5 weeks to process. Once we've got the mould, we get the body out of that, which then is jointed in certain places. The arms will have to come off, the leg will have to come off, all for dressing. We have to fix the heads in place. Some figures like, for instance, Stormtroopers, C-3PO, they have the rigid armour going over the top of the rigid understructure, so become a more technical issue, but then once they're all fitted together and that, they don't need to come apart, those sort of figures. Yeah, so once we've got the figure done and we give it a slight base paint and that, the hands themselves are life casts from various people, whoever hands suit the actual character. They are then meticulously finished, and once everything's checked out with sculpture, it's all then passed on to hair insertion.
Okay, so we're given a brief by the sculptors.
The figure stylists, yeah.
That's the one. And then we go into our hair store and we pick out the best colour hair, and we start to do the hair insertion. It can take up to 5 weeks, depending on the figure.
And that's very meticulous, one strand at a time. Did you say, maybe that was you in the video.
It wasn't, no.
It was, but something like 30,000 hairs, was that what she said?
Ballpark figure, yeah.
Ballpark figure, so that is each individually placed on the head.
And we use the eye of a needle, and we cut this eye in half so it makes like a prong shape. I don't know if there's any pictures of it.
No, I don't think so, but we can see this here on the camera. Yeah.
So
I'm not sure how well you're going to see it on the camera, but it's literally a needle.
Yeah, it's a tiny needle. And we begin to insert by basically hooking the hair and sliding it into the wax. The wax is heated up beforehand. We use a lamp, and we work our way around the head, and we use our reference photos as much as possible to just try and get it as close to the person or character.
And it's human hair, so...
It's all human hair. I mean, with Chewie, we used different hair.
That's yak hair, right?
Yes.
You used yak hair, and the original Chewbacca at the archives was yak hair.
It was also used, yeah.
We made Chewbacca in the same way that we made him, they did for the original film. So it's all a knitted suit. It turned out the same person that made it for The Force Awakens made ours just coincidentally.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
she
incredible.
was one of our knitters. There's a few coincidences like this, but she was one of our knitters, and we're like, oh, I've got this crazy project for you. I need a 7-foot knitted onesie. And she was like, oh yeah, I know a few things about that. And so she knit it for us. And then it goes back to these guys, and it's all wigged on, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing. He's actually the most expensive figure we've ever made. He was about £100,000 just from man hours, the amount of yak hair, all of that. It's just, yeah.
Wow, 100,000 pounds to make Chewbacca. Incredible, incredible. And that's one of, how many figures total are there now, including Rey, at the exhibit?
I think we have 17,
17
in our London attraction. And the Berlin attraction has, does it have 12 stalls?
Something like 12, yeah.
So Rey's also, we've actually made 2 of these. One of them's going to Berlin and one of them's going to be situated in London. But that won't be until the end of August, I believe.
Think London's in the beginning of August, and Berlin is at the end of August.
So when people come to visit you, they can count on August as a time where they can go and see the new Rey.
Yeah, it's a safe time.
Fantastic. That's great. So many different disciplines. Can you talk a little bit about just how many people it takes in order to do one of these? Because you have a whole group of artists?
Yeah, we have quite a big team. So the part of the process I skipped over actually was, as you mentioned, the figure styling. So we actually start with a brief. We've got 3 figure stylists. So they'll create a brief, which would go to somebody like Brian to kind of approve, because if we're depicting Darth Maul, for example, well, at what point in time do you depict Darth Maul? Do you depict him from the first scene that he's in, where he's kind of hooded, or do you depict him in combat? So that there's quite a lot of consideration goes into that, and obviously what we're thinking is what would the experience be for the visitor? Like how can you, as a visitor to Madame Tussauds, interact with that figure? Is it something that you're going to pose and have a selfie with, or is it something, in the case of the Star Wars figures, we actually, a lot of them you can kind of go up to with a lightsaber and pose as though you're fighting them, although we prefer it if you don't actually fight them because they don't move and we don't want them damaged.
Right. So,
sorry.
So in terms of poses and things, and this is something that you do quite a bit at Lucasfilm, right? You work with a lot of the high-end collectibles, and what kind of, how do those conversations go in terms of how you pose these characters? Because that, like you mentioned before, is really so much about making them so lifelike, you know?
Well, first of all, some of the conversations, all the conversations obviously were done over the phone, and one of the biggest challenges was, for me, it was quite early in the morning. Basically, what we would do is they'd send some photos over, which is actually very difficult for me because I'm used to working with physical samples. The photos really, I needed to trust this team a whole lot, but they're incredible experts at what they do.
They're Madame Tussauds, aren't they? So yeah, you knew you were in good hands.
I mean, we're trying to, when we're submitting our work for approval, obviously we're trying to depict it as accurately as possible, but essentially you're trying to assess a three-dimensional object in a two-dimensional format, which is a little bit challenging. You know, it doesn't really, you don't really have the same response to it you do when you actually stand next to it and you have the presence of standing next to a person, as opposed to looking at some images.
And for me, it was so much more than the likeness. It was it was really trying to incorporate the Star Wars story into the figures. When you look into their eyes, do you feel like you're part of the actual Star Wars universe, which so many people want? That's what a Star Wars fan wants.
And when you look at these figures, it really struck me, and even again with Rey, how much personality is in the face. And I imagine that the face and the eyes must be such a huge topic of conversation when you're sculpting. And again, by hand. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're really doing that by hand.
Yeah, we do sculpt by hand. So going back to the beginning of the process, so we'd have two sculptors working simultaneously. The sculptor that's working on the head is obviously purely focusing on that, and I suppose you're trying to depict the likeness of the subject, obviously, but also, as you say, the expression is so much of it. You don't want this figure. We don't want this figure to look like Daisy Ridley. We want it to look like Rey, and that's a different thing. You know, it's not. Obviously, we have figures of celebrities on the red carpet as themselves, but when you're depicting a character from a film, you're depicting a persona. You know, and that isn't the actor. That's the character that they're becoming. So, yeah, as you say, the eyes. We had lots of conversations about the eyes. The sort of level of intensity that you have with something like this. Similar thing with Anakin Skywalker. Oh yeah, we have some samples of eyes. So
look at that.
Oh yeah, we have. These are quite fun. So this is a normal human eye.
Let's move it. Can you move it left or right of Yoda there, and tilt it up?
So we use these. The ideal situation for us is that we meet the celebrity. Sorry, we meet the celebrity that we're making, and this is one of our sets of eyes that we take along, and we literally hold these eyes up next to the individual, and we try and match the colours as best we can. So we really kind of break it down. We look at the colour of the sclera, which is the white of the eye. Obviously, we look at the colour of the iris, but an iris generally has 3, 4, maybe even more colors. You generally have one color towards the center, towards the pupil, and another color towards the limbus, which is the sort of outer ring of the iris. So we have a selection of eyes. You'll never just pick one up and say that's perfect. It will always be, oh, we want the white of that eye, and we want the limbus of that eye, and we want the iris of another eye. These are a bit of fun. These are Salacious Crumb's eyes. So obviously they're much smaller than a human eye.
I have a fun eye story, so depending on your idea of fun. But I flew to Lyon to measure Jabba the Hutt's eyes because they went at the archive at the time. So I had to go with the photographer because they were on. Is it the Star Wars Identities that was doing the rounds?
Out on tour, yeah.
It's fantastic. Go see that as well. So we had access to Jabba's eyes, and it's the most precious thing I think I've ever held because they were just kind of like
Irreplaceable.
Irreplaceable, yeah. So we had to go out and measure those and get the Pantones. And so that was like a whirlwind trip to Lyon.
And Jabba the Hutt looks incredible too. It looks just like Return of the Jedi. It's such a perfect. So yeah,
it's a great
just nailed
figure.
that one. Yeah, yeah. So we talked about. Sorry, you wanted to continue?
Yeah. So a lot of time is spent looking at the eyes. Yeah, that's very true. I think when the eyes are kind of the focal point. When you meet somebody, when you talk to somebody, you look them in the eyes. That's what you do. And obviously it's the same thing with our figures. People are drawn towards the face and they look the figure in the eye. So that's probably, in terms of the size of that part of the figure, it probably has a tremendous amount of time, spent on it.
So you've talked about sculpting. You've talked about the face and animation, posing, hair. Can we touch a little bit more on costume? Even we got a bit into research, but everything from how it's weathered to how it's painted. I see you had some paint samples there. I'd love to hear about that, but especially with Star Wars, there's so much detail, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, so the colouring, we were really lucky. We had a lot of access to a lot of images from Lucasfilm from around the time. So we always try and get it like as close as possible. These are actually some palettes that were used to paint the Yoda that's in the attraction at the minute. So initially it would have started off like this, and then one of our artists would have, So one of our artists would have gone through hundreds and hundreds of pictures of Yoda, watched clips back over and over again, and then used like 20 different colors of green to match it and bring Yoda to life, really. And then it's all looked together with, the costume and everything else. But then, like working with a figure like Rey, we'd have one colorist would work on the head, and another colorist, myself, worked on the body, and you're trying to match everything up and use the many images and get everything down to like every minute detail. And we use oil paints for the head and the body, and then also it's done like a splatting technique. So if you look really closely, it's just thousands and thousands of tiny little dots that are loads of different colors. So if you look, at her face, there's like all the tiny dots, like red, brown, creams, greens, everything. So it's all broken up and helps give like a realistic flesh color.
Now, is that that's a technique you use across MadamTussauds?
Yeah.
To just get a sort of a natural human look? Yes.
Yeah, because you want to bring like every little detail that you can. Like even if you look at your hands and move them, you can see how the color changes. And so that's the kind of detail that we have. Every single line, or even the dirt under her fingernails, everything's taken into consideration.
Well, since we're talking about Rey, which is a brand new figure, we see these pictures are just absolutely amazing. Can you take us from the very beginning of how this started? Where was the film in production? Had it already been released? What was that process like, doing the research specifically on The Force Awakens Rey, all the way until today?
So Rey was an interesting one. We started her in December before the film had come out, so it was really difficult to have discussions about, well, what pose can we do her in? What's she doing? And obviously, we couldn't be told that information. It was like, you have to, no, we don't want you to do that. So it was really hard to come up with a pose. So we went to Pinewood, I think a week or so before the film came out, and they let us measure the costume again. So they had the costume, and we met up with the prop shop and looked at all of her props. So prop shop actually have supplied the staff for this, so it's the same as the one in the film.
Wonderful, I see.
And they were fantastic, because obviously it's still in production. All of these fabrics are exactly the same as the ones that they used for the film costume. It took a lot of hunting down, but we managed to find them all. So this is absolutely spot on. And she...
Also, well, the size of things is something we didn't mention. Obviously, our figures are also to scale, as well as just being a visual representation. We weren't able to meet with Daisy Ridley as she was busy filming while we were busy making the figure. But we were very fortunate that we had access to the prop shop. They helped us out a lot. And they were able to provide us with lots of sizes and dimensions in just things like the height, that the figure should be, and the proportions. Because obviously, when you stand next to the figure, you need to feel as though you're standing next to the person. So it's essential that the height's correct, so their sort of dimensions are correct. And then with something like the prop, going back to that, it's essential that the detail is absolutely spot on, because people are going to notice if it's symmetrical at either end, and it should be different at either end. All those kind of things need to be taken into account. So I think more so with a figure like this than with most of our figures.
One of the things I wanted to touch on in general about the experience as well, and just obviously looking at the stage here, is lighting and set. Right, because so much thought went into, so clear that so much thought went into the set pieces that you have for the Star Wars experience. And can you just talk a little bit about lighting? Because it seems to me there's lighting in real life, and then there's lighting as you remember it in a movie, and how different those are. How are those conversations?
That's one of the biggest challenges we face.
You're smiling over here. Oh, yes.
Yeah, we had a conversation about that as well. Yep. This is one of the biggest challenges we face, because your skin color changes so much under different lights. If you put a white light on somebody, they go a certain way. If you put a blue tinge light on somebody or a red tinge light on somebody, and exactly the same thing happens with our figures. So what we need to do is try and assess what the true color is, and we will often find ourselves with maybe a half dozen photographs of the same person, and you think, well, in that picture their skin looks kind of on the green side, in that picture it looks kind of on the pink side, and that one's kind of blue, and you don't know whether you have to try and assess whether you're competing with the lighting and that's what you're seeing, or whether it's the image that you're looking at, whether it's just been printed slightly an odd color. So a lot of our coloring time is spent assessing that.
And then a lot of changes.
And then the light changes from one room to another.
Yeah, because when you're in the studio floor where we do all the painting, it will look one way and you'll think you'll have it perfect. And then you bring it into, we have a crit room, and we have the lighting in the crit room set up in that way. It will reflect how the lighting is when you go to the attraction. So then you could bring the figure in there, and then you're like, oh no, it's too green, or it's too red, or too purple. And then you have to go and make changes with that as well. And then if, Ray's kind of on her own, but then if it's other figures are with her, you have to look at how their colouring affects and how they look together. So it's a huge combination of factors that would determine what the end result is.
Well, and I'm thinking too, as you're looking at reference materials, all actors, everyone under lights and camera wears makeup. So there's the natural, but then there's the natural with the makeup, and then there's probably how you're made up in Abu Dhabi on set, in incredible heat, versus how you're shooting at Pinewood. Does that factor into your painting process as well? In terms of
it definitely would affect it, because depending on where, just say, like Ray's depicted in the movie, like if it was earlier on or later, she's in a desert, so the more like sun-beaten and like sunburnt, or not sunburnt, but darker and kind of broken down, obviously you'd have to incorporate that, whereas we kind of, it's earlier in the movie that she's depicted. But then in general, if someone is, outside, or if they're inside, if it's cold or hot, you have to look at all these factors when considering what colors to use and how to break it down.
I'm just seeing the raised eyebrow there as well. It's just such a nice touch, on Ray. Just the attitude there, I want to get back a little bit to the detail because I'm just blown away by the detail, not just of the figure itself, not just of the coloring and the pose and the likeness, but the story that you tell. If you go to the experience, you really do tell a story through all 6, now 7 films. Can you talk about the conversation of how the experience unfolds and how that affects the decisions to make which figures?
So when you enter, we like to tell the story from the very first prequel film right up to when you leave, and it's The Force Awakens. So you enter, and it's the Jewel of the Fates, that's what I'm calling it. So you enter the Jewel of the Fates, and you see Obi-Wan, and they're fighting Darth Maul, and then you move through, and you're into the Anakin. Yeah, and then you can like fight, and then it sort of goes on to the original films, and so you tell the story. So you're moving through the story of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, it's such an incredible job that you do.
I just wanted to take a step back before, and it's really interesting that all the pieces that you're picking up, the story, the eyebrow, the eyes, the coloring, these are things that we spent hours and hours on the phone over. You're definitely picking up on the parts that we really focused on to try and get Rey and all of these figures at MadamTussauds, all these figures to a point where they're absolutely believable. They're absolutely spot on with the story. You look in their eyes and you see the actual character. The color on this one was actually pretty tough. What they would send me was blocks of painted wax, and then we'd have to talk about the color. And is it, Rey obviously is in the desert at this point, and so she should look like she's in the desert, but she can't look like she's sunburnt because that would be bad. And all the things like that.
Well, I take no credit for picking up on that. It's just the level of detail that you've provided just immediately pops out. I mean, wouldn't you say you just look at that and you just see this incredible amount of detail? I just want to give you guys a round of applause for this, Rey, one more time, please. It's just fantastic. How can you just describe for people who have never been, and then I want to open it up to you to be able to ask them questions as well. How do fans of Star Wars who come to MadamTussauds, how do you see them interacting with these figures? Because I was so also blown away by how immersive it was. Any fun stories about watching fans go through the experience?
I went with one of my friends recently, and her young daughter was about 7, and she didn't care very much about Luke. She loved the bad guys, so she was like, I want to see Darth Vader. And so she was like leaning over, like in the middle shot, she was doing that, and there's actually a wind machine there, so that blows back your hair. There's a great shot there, and she was like, ecstatic over Emperor Palpatine. I mean, this is a 7-year-old girl, and she loved the baddie. She was like, I want to be a Sith when I grow up. I want to be Anakin. And she loved Jabba as well. Yeah.
That's great. So people really do get up and close, and they take selfies, and they do all that. I almost took a selfie as I walked on stage. I was very distracted.
To do that.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. And people will be able to do that as well in August when it's open. Yeah.
Chewbacca's one of my favorite parts of the exhibition, because you actually sit in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon and you hit a big red button and you make the jump to light speed, which is kind of fun.
So again, another great set piece, and just that you get that fantasy fulfillment of being a part of Star Wars.
Yeah, it's nice to actually sit into it and exactly feel as though you're kind of living in that moment.
Well, I want to open it up to you for questions. We're going to have a microphone here down this aisle and another one down this aisle. If you have questions about the painstaking process and the love and care that went into making these figures, or questions about the Star Wars experience, now would be a great time to ask. Give you a second to get up there. Yeah, go ahead, right here.
Right, so are you going to do any MadamTussauds exhibits for Rogue One?
I don't think we can answer that. I would just say watch this space. I would just say watch this space.
Watch that. Oh, watch that face. Oh, watch this space. I thought you were doing a poker face. Watch this space. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys had a great time doing this, so I'd go see it if you did. I don't know. Right here.
Hi. Where do you get the human hair?
That is a very good question.
Right?
From my head. No. From various suppliers. Yeah, from various suppliers. Yeah, just, you know, pardon? It's ethically sourced.
Good.
No, it is, seriously. Ethically sourced.
Oh, got it. Okay, right here.
I was going to ask how you shave a yak, but I was going to ask, obviously people touching the exhibits all the time, so do you have to keep repairing them on quite a regular basis because people have obviously oil in their fingers and...
Yeah, we do. Every attraction has a maintenance team, and those guys have really got their work cut out for them. They have to make sure everything stays in good order. So, yeah, as Trish said, the figures are painted with oil paint. So if people get a little bit carried away and rub the surface a lot, they will rub the paint off the surface. So that has to be patched up, obviously. Hair is probably the most challenging aspect of maintenance because, hair just moves around so much, and if you've got a figure with a particular sort of back comb style or quite a lot of height in their hairstyle, over time that will just sort of drop. So that needs to be regularly restyled. Obviously, the same with the costumes. We have to make sure the costumes are pretty well secured so things don't move around and everything stays where it's supposed to stay so that you don't end up with Han Solo's holster, around his kneecap. So yeah, we have a whole team whose job is just looking out for that stuff. And they basically do a walk around of the attraction every evening after the visitors have left, just to see what needs to be looked at.
Now, I notice a lot of the characters are holding lightsabers as well. Is there special maintenance that has to happen with holding those lightsabers? And do you ever catch folks trying to have lightsaber fights with some of these characters?
Those suckers are glued down, believe me. There's no moving
really?
those. Yeah. There's a lot of people obviously get very excited and hit it a little bit too hard. So we do have to make sure we're absolutely on maintenance with those. Because if anything breaks, we take it out because we don't obviously want everyone to have a rubbish experience. And if you turn up and Darth Vader's not got his lightsaber, it just wouldn't be the same. So we fix things as soon as they break, and we have a lot of spares.
Or if Luke was missing a hand,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
He's always losing that hand. He leaves it around, yeah.
The maintenance team in London told me that Princess Leia's fingers kept breaking where she was sitting on Jabba's throne, and it was because where she sat on the cushions, and obviously her fingers are rigid, but below her fingers were a series of cushions which are soft, and people would climb on to sit next to her to have their photograph taken, and press her fingers down into the cushions, and the fingers would snap.
Oh, good job.
So they had to basically build a plate into one of the cushions that you couldn't see in order to support her hand. It hasn't changed the way the figure appears in any way, but now it's resilient to that damage. Obviously, while we're constructing the figures, we try and bear that in mind. We try and work out what potential damage they could suffer, with visitors having their photos taken with them every day. But we kind of can't always think of everything, and until the figure's actually there, you don't know what problems you're going to have. So there's a bit of thinking on your feet as far as maintenance goes.
So do we have any? I actually had another question for you. How long and how many conversations took place about Rey's hair? How long did it take you to do the hair on that statue?
That one, it's about 4 to 5 weeks. That's inclusive of eyebrows as well, and eyelashes, which are also put in. So anywhere where hair should be on her head, it's all been inserted. one by one.
Well, because you think about people taking a shower and washing their hair on a regular basis. Obviously, maintenance is very different.
Yeah.
Is that how is that issue addressed, if at all? I guess it's different because they're. How is it different? Do they have to have like regular washings and things?
It's exactly how you would treat regular human hair. So when the insertion is finished, the hair is washed and then it's styled as you would style your own hair. So yeah, we've used real product. There's hairspray. There's anything you can imagine which you would use on your own hair. It's on her as well.
Because it's oil paint as well, we can wash the hair without it affecting the paint as well. So that's why we use
Just
the oil
runs
paint.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, you often walk into the hair and colouring department and see a fully finished painted head sitting in the sink, having its hair washed, which is quite surreal experience.
That is absolutely fascinating. Well, I just want to thank you guys for continuing the tradition of having incredible artists on stage at Star Wars Celebration. Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say to Star Wars fans?
Come see us.
Come and see you, so they can come and find you. You want to say some information about the experience?
And then as well, Ray will be there from the 1st of August and the Ray in Berlin, the end of August.
So Ray, the 1st of August here in London, and then in Berlin, end of August.
Yeah, and BB-8's also in London at the moment.
So you'll be able to see Ray and BB-8.
That's right, yep.
Come August. So all 7 films you'll be able to experience at Madame Tussauds.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. Well, give them a round of applause, you guys. This has just been incredible. Madame Tussauds, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. This has just been an incredible hour. Thank you. We'll be back with more.